Hi there, welcome back. So in this video, I just wanted to share a beautiful moment that I've had this week and about loving all of it. Every human experience that we get to have, being aware of it, being grateful for it, you know. Um, yesterday, I had to take my daughter to her interview. Next year, she starts high school. And they wanted to interview her just to get a feel for her, for the things she likes, the things she doesn't like from school, kind of find taking notes. But while we were sitting outside in the foyer, in the reception area, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her, and she's almost the same height as me. So now we're actually eye to eye, when we're looking at each other. And I'm looking at how grown up she is. And in that moment, I'm taken back to her first days at preschool, where she would always be crying because she didn't want to be separate from me. Always. And so little, remembering how little she was, and her little hands wrapped around mine, and then she'd just wrap around me with her arms because she didn't want me to go. I was remembering those days as I'm sitting there. And then I was remembering her kindergarten, and dropping her off at school. And here was different. She knew the school. She knew a lot of the children that were going to the school. She had a best friend in her classroom. So she was so happy to go to school. And she had a wonderful teacher the first year. And just remembering her happy face, still little, still tiny little thing, still waving with her tiny little hand. And, I'm looking at her and seeing her, remembering those days when she was so, so little. And then I look again and, I see her so grown up, starting high school next year. And in that moment, the tears started rolling down my cheeks. And, she looks over to me like, oh, now what? Because I cry about everything. I'm hopeless. Everything makes me cry. If it's a flower that looks beautiful, I start to cry. If it's sometimes my dogs, I get overwhelmed when they look at me, and I just feel the love pouring in, and I start to cry. And so there I am with tears rolling down my cheeks, and she's looking at me like, now what? We're about to walk in here and you're crying. Why are you crying? And in that moment she said, are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm good, and I wiped it away. But in that moment, I just had so much gratitude for this life that I got to have her so little, that little thing crying, going to preschool. And at the time for me, it was the most heartbreaking thing. I hated dropping her off to preschool because she was always crying. She never wanted to be separate, And I used to think she was so little, too little to be leaving her there. But I did it, And then remembering back to the days when she was a baby, and because she was the firstborn, she ended up being the only one that we ended up having. Every time she'd cry, I'd be like, oh, anxious, running around crazy, trying to control, so she cried minimal, I didn't like her crying. And so I would panic, and get all upset that she was crying. How do I fix this? Is it the nappy? Is it food? What is it? What does she need? But then I remember one day, I was so sleep deprived. I think it was a year into it, and she was teething. And she had 4 molars coming all at the same time. And it was a really rough week. We got hardly any sleep. She was running high fevers. And I remember her one night crying. And we had this rocker. And I had her on my chest and I was rocking her to sleep, And in that moment, I just had this realization that the crying was a good thing. Because not only is it the way the babies communicate to us that they need something, it's just the only way they can say, hey, I need something, they just do it through crying. But we're so conditioned that crying is a bad thing, that every time she'd cry, I would panic, literally panic, But in this moment, I'm holding her on the rocker, and we're rocking backwards and forwards, and she'd gone to sleep for a minute, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm so grateful right now. I am so grateful because for 15 long years we'd been waiting for her to come, and I had almost given up hope. I think my husband had given up hope that it was ever going to happen, and I'd almost given up hope. You know, there was always just that little glimmer that maybe, just maybe, she'll come, you know? And in that moment, I remembered all those years of wishing and praying and waiting and waiting and waiting for her to come. And in that moment, I found her crying beautiful, you know? I just found it so beautiful, so divine. There was something divine about her crying in that moment when I was thinking, it's okay. It's okay. You know, it's what babies do. I had to let go of all that preconceived conditioning, all of that, you know, that, oh, crying is bad, the preconceived notions that crying is bad. And all that conditioning of, you know, crying is bad. Even as you're growing up, whenever you were crying, what's wrong with you? You know, parents always look at you, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? You know, like, stop crying. You know, you're a kid, you should be happy, you've got everything. This was the way I grew up. You got everything, you should be happy. You know, not this, what's this crying? What's this? You know? So I grew up with that. Crying was bad. Being angry was bad. You know, all negative things. But, you know, when you look at it, if you're taught to manage it in that moment, when the anger comes up, if you're taught to look at the anger, why is it there? What is it trying to tell you? Rather than push it down, when we shove it all down. No, we don't want to look at you. We don't want to look at you, anger. No, go away. You're bad. It's a bad thing. I can't express you today. I can't even with you right now, right? Go away. And when the sadness would come and the tears would well up in your eyes, you'd be like, no, go away. It's a bad thing. No, grown-ups are going to yell at me. What's wrong with me? You know? So, you know, it's funny. One day I was listening to Rika doing the Adventure in Oneness, the life coaching course I did with her. And I remember her saying something about she didn't cry for, I don't know, most of her adult life. And, you know, I had forgotten. I had suppressed it so much that I had forgotten. I didn't cry until I was in my first depression. I think I was 23, and when I started crying, I didn't stop for a year and a half. Seriously. I don't know how I functioned that year because I was still doing uni, I was still doing all these other things. But sometimes I would find myself in class. I would be in one of my classes at uni, and I would just be, and I'd run off to the bathroom. The tears would just they'd just overtake. I just couldn't hold them back anymore. You know, after so many years of suppressing, I just found myself one day that I started crying and I just couldn't stop. You know? But it's funny that I had suppressed that for so long that I had forgotten that for most of my childhood, until I was 23, I didn't cry. No matter how much pain I was in, I didn't cry. I remember from quite little, I went to the dentist with a toothache. And my dad said to me that if I cried or if I yelled or if I made a fuss when I was in there, he would leave me in there with this stranger. It was my first time at the dentist. I'd never met this man before. And I look up at the dentist that was standing at the door and I was like, you're going to leave me with this guy? Seriously? But that's what he said to me. So from that moment on, I mean, even before that, I had, nothing. Not even a I squeezed his hand. That I remember. I squeezed his hand till I probably, made him numb. Stopped the blood circulating to his fingertips. He had quite big hands anyway. But I do remember squeezing his hand so tight while I was at the dentist because it was very painful. And the only time I cried in my childhood was when I was put into this private school. And they kept talking on about the devil and the devil, and the devil's going to take your soul, and the devil's going to take you, and you're doomed, and the devil. And, they just drummed it into me so much that I spent a good, I think it was 6 months, that I would wake up crying and I would go to bed crying. I would wake up crying because I had to go back to that school, and I would go to bed crying thinking, oh no, I've got to go back to that school in the morning. And I was so distraught that my parents had to take me out of the school because I just couldn't stop. I just didn't want to be there. I just couldn't with what they were teaching. I couldn't deal with it. And but that was the last time I cried, and I was 9. So between 9 and 23, nothing. I was dry. You know, suppress. Let's push it all down. Push, get down there. Get down. So, you know, we do funny things, or we're taught to do funny things. But it's for all of it's for a reason. You know, we have these experiences for a reason. And so, you know, in this video, what I wanted to encourage you to do is to start looking at your beautiful human experience and love all of it. Love all of it, because you're here for all of it. It's all divine. It's all sacred. Everything you're going through. Doesn't matter what it looks like. It's not good and it's not bad. It's not right and it's not wrong. It's the experiences you came to have. So I'd be interested to know, you know, what kind of things were you taught as a child? Did you have to suppress the crying and the anger? Were you taught that it's weak to show your feelings, you know? Because I always thought it was you know, you showed strength when you didn't cry, or you didn't show fear, or you didn't show any emotions. It was to be strong. It meant you were strong, I mean. But yeah, it's a funny life. But it's all beautiful, you know, when you look back on it and you realize the trajectory, you know, what you've experienced, what you were meant to gain from each beautiful experience. In some, you're meant to gain compassion for your parents, compassion for your siblings, compassion for yourself, love for yourself, for everything you've been through, for every rejection, for every time you weren't allowed to express who you are. Love for all of it, because you came to have that experience. All right, my darlings, I love you guys. Remember to click like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the messages, and I'll see you in the next video, okay? Bye for now.